Everyone, if we could have everyone stand up as our state championship football team enters the auditorium while our band plays the fight song. Excellent. That's a great way to start this off. Thank you all. So good afternoon, students, faculty, coaches, and distinguished guests. Today we're gathered here to recognize the dynamic efforts of the Fort Hill High School football team in their achievement as the State of Maryland Single A champions. With us today are members of our Board of Education, Mr. Bob Farrell, Mrs. Tammy Fraley, and Mrs. Deb Frank, our Board of Education President, Mrs. Crystal Bender, and our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Jeffrey Blank. Additionally, I would like to recognize the presence of Mrs. Tracy Leonard, Supervisor of Athletics for Allegany County Public Schools. It is with much appreciation that I welcome you all to join us in today's celebration and recognition. The accomplishment of a great team is often the result of not only talent, but also of the reflection of emotion and spirit. Until I stepped foot into the role as principal at Fort Hill High School, I had never experienced an atmosphere so rich with tradition and full of pride. Each fan in the stands is enthusiastic from the first foot placed upon those fabulous 52 to the last play of the game. A large part of the enthusiasm at Greenway, though, is because of groups like our cheerleaders, our band, our flags and color guard. They keep the crowd going and the team motivated. Would our varsity cheerleaders, members of our Big Red Band, and our color guard please stand and be recognized? Thank you for all you do. The role of the band advisor, the cheer advisor, and our athletic director and coaching staff in the success of the overall program at Fort Hill is often overlooked, and at times it can seem underappreciated. I want each advisor and coach, along with the athletic director, Mr. Roy DeVore, to know that your consistent efforts to make our school shine and your faithful support of our students is not lost on me. Your time and dedication is to be admired. Without each of you, we would not be able to be here today for this recognition. I want you to also stand and be recognized. And I know that makes you uncomfortable, but we want you to stand and be recognized. Thank you. But today we are here to shine a spotlight on the success of a team that overcame a multitude of challenges in a season that I shall carry with me all the days of my life. What began as a season that had us all questioning if the game we were playing would be our last due to the uncertainty of COVID, ended its regular season homecoming game without the companionship of one of our own. As a tribute to our fallen friend, classmate, teammate, and student, a group of young men came together dedicating the remaining moments of play to Saquon Jenkins. The strength that each of you have modeled for your peers, our school, and the entire community has been amazing. It has shown that even in the saddest of times, there exists moments of beauty. For out of the tragic events that occurred that late October day, you have taught us all that love is a powerful thing. Your love and commitment to Quan, no doubt, played a part in your success as a team. I would say it played a big part. You won the title of state champions for him, and today we celebrate your success by recognizing your achievement. Long live Quan, and job well done to some of the finest young men I have grown to know. Please stand as a team and be recognized. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Coach Zach Alcar. He is going to come to the podium to share with the group some of the highlights of the season and also to recognize each of the players of our Fort Hill High School champion team.
All right, so Ms. Cannon acknowledged that you don't like to be recognized and it'd be uncomfortable, but doesn't compare to this. So we'll try to get through this. I'm not much of a talker, but thank you guys all for coming out. Again, I'd like to thank the administration for allowing me and the coaching staff to coach these 5 young men. Really appreciate and thank the band and the cheerleaders, Sentinel Sam. I know we put in a lot of hours, and a lot of people see that, but just from the personal experience that I've had with you guys put in a lot of work too, and oftentimes gets overlooked. And just know that we're really appreciative of all your support, not only this year, but through all the years that you guys have been a part of all this. Really appreciate it. For praying to the parents that are watching the live stream. I appreciate you guys as well. There's oftentimes a lot of these kids don't drive yet, and we require a lot of hours, and that requires you to take kids back and forth, and you trusted us with your sons. Really appreciate that. Appreciate the other coaches on staff. You guys did most of the work. I was just kind of here managing it. You guys did a great job this year in every aspect of the way. And the students for all your support, and obviously the players for all you guys' hard work. This is a group that probably always had a dream of being state champions. From the time they played on the youth leagues up through middle school, I'm sure that was on their minds. That has been the norm here for about a decade. So I'm sure the thought had crossed their mind on more than one occasion about the possibilities of them being a state champion. When COVID hit, that seemed to throw a wrench in things. We could no longer do the things that made us so successful. You had the most successful coach in Fort Hill history stepping down, and questions began to spring up, especially in the spring when we weren't as successful as we normally would have been. Some people, their expectations of what we were going to be able to do moving forward had been dampened. People didn't have faith in us that we were going to be able to get the job done. The schedule was tough. We can't find anyone to play us, so we had to reach out to some bigger schools. We had to schedule a 4A school that had just been to the state semifinals and a 3A school that had just won the state championship. We had to play a Mountain Ridge team that had just recently beat us in the spring. Okay, and of course, you would have Allegany at homecoming. People began to talk about 5-5, being 500. Would we be able to make the playoffs? The kids had a pretty good preseason. We had the quad scrimmage, and we brought in St. Francis, which, if you know anything about local football, state football, St. Francis is a big deal. And where they only brought up their B team, those B team kids often end up making their A team. And we played really well against them, to the point where when we had our week 8 bye, they wanted a little bit of revenge, and they wanted us to play their A team. We had another scrimmage against Newtown, in which we did fairly well as well. So we had this good preseason, and then the real season started. And admittedly, it started with a slight disappointment, if you could call it that. It was a win against Northern, 17-7. But even though we won, even though the game was never in doubt, I feel like most of the players and the coaches walked out of the mat room that night slightly disappointed. And if you would read Facebook and the message boards, people who think they know everything, they began to question just a little bit louder. What's going on? Will this team have success? Or are they going to be 500 like they predicted in the beginning of the season? Those questions were quickly put to rest, at least internally, the next week, as one of the largest schools in the state visited Greenway. Although Old Mill, who was a very successful team this year, they made it to the 4A quarterfinals. They scored over 40 points a game. Our Sentinels completely dominated the game with lockdown coverage and a pass rush that came from all angles. Okay, internally, again, we quieted the doubters, winning 28-13. Southern was up next. It was our first road trip of the season. A game up at Southern in their new stadium that I believe only had bleachers on one side. Our people had to come up and sit in their lawn chairs, but it's all good. The game was dominated from start to finish en route to a 69-0 victory. It seemed as it was a surefire win for us. However, due to some COVID issues at Southern and some contact tracing, we would be faced with more questions in our next game. Our next game was at Hollidaysburg, and because of that COVID exposure, we went into the game with only 4 active linemen. And if you know anything about football, you need 5. Another issue at that point in time is I believe that our JV team was also in quarantine, so we just couldn't call up all the JV kids to play. We only had a select few who had been vaccinated that were able to play. However, we were able to pull a couple kids up. They helped us get through the game. We started that game out on fire. We built up a 35-7 lead at halftime, yet we were out of gas in the second half. They had momentum, and they ultimately ended up making that game an extremely close game. Yet in the end, we responded, we showed our resilience, and we were able to knock down their Hail Mary throw to secure a 35-33 win. Next up was Oakdale. Okay, the schedule's not going to lighten up there. Again, they were a returning state champion. They were coming off a 1-point overtime loss to what would ultimately end up being the 3A runner-up in Lignor. And we knew that we would have to play tough to win, and we did. We had dominant line play, both offensively and defensively. Again, we locked down their stud receivers, and we ultimately ended up dominating that game 42-7. And this win was the win that certainly began to open up eyes. People began to have faith in us and what we could do this season. And you could see that, especially downstate, as we began to rise up in the state rankings. With that being said, even though we had wins against bigger schools that had some recent great history, in a lot of people's eyes, the real test was Mountain Ridge. Mountain Ridge had just beaten us in the spring. They had a lot of kids coming back, including their quarterback, Bryce Snyder. People had been talking about this game since last spring, maybe in hopes that Mountain Ridge would finally prove that they had surpassed Fort Hill as a program. The game started out great. It was really close at halftime. But when we talked in halftime, we reminded them of who we are and what we can do. And we told them if they were able to come out strong in the second half, that eventually Mountain Ridge would wear down and we would take over. And that's exactly what happened. We submitted our number one spot in the area, winning 37-7. Next up was another road trip to Smithsburg, and it may have been one of the weirdest football games I've ever been a part of. It was a road game on a Thursday night. It was their senior night. There was no booth that we could coach from, and there were officials who thought that I was somebody else and put me in my place from the get-go. There were obviously no favors that were going to be had on this night. After sitting for an hour, waiting for their pregame senior night to finally end, we took the field, and it was a classic trap game. We just came off 3 consecutive big wins, including Mountain Ridge the week before, and had Allegany up for the next game against a Smithsburg team who at that point hadn't had much success. It wasn't our best performance. Smithsburg played really well, but it didn't matter as we walked away with a 48-20 victory. At this point, everything was falling into place. This season had been successful so far. We were undefeated going into homecoming, and then we suffered our biggest loss of the season, and for many of us, our lives, as our teammate, friend, brother, Cy Jenkins was tragically and senselessly taken from us the Thursday before homecoming. For many of us, including myself, it was one of the worst moments of my life. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any answers. The only thing I knew at the time is that football didn't matter, and we had to do whatever we could to help repair each other's hearts. And that process is still ongoing. We still hurt every day. We still miss Kwan every day. And we will for a very long time. But the healing began immediately. Many of you guys took part in that candlelight vigil, and I was completely blown away by the support that the community had, including many of his classmates who showed up just hours after his death. With many of you watching your friend die outside of a place that you hold dear to your hearts, a safe place, and for some of you guys, a second home. I don't know how you guys did it, but you were able to come together and support each other in your darkest moments. And for that, all of you should be commended. Just please know that there are many people in this school that are more than willing to talk to you guys. If anybody ever needs to talk about anything, please reach out to a classmate, to a teacher, to guidance, to an administrator, a coach. We're all here for you, not only to teach you, but to help you through life. After the candlelight vigil, I had many players come to me and say that they wanted to play in Quan's honor. At that point, I still wasn't sure. They were basically running on fumes on emotions. The next day, the team spent the day in the mat room with each other. They met, and the decision was made to play the game in Quan's honor. It was 100% a team decision. They wanted to honor Quan the best way they could, and that was playing the game. It was a very emotional game. The kids wanted to start the game with only 10 players on defense, and we would play our first play without Quan, who had at that point become our starter at safety. Only his number 3 jersey would be in his spot. Allegany agreed to let the clock wind down to take a delay of game penalty, which we obviously declined. It was a moment of great sportsmanship and dedication to Quan. The game itself still had to be played, and for the most part, was played with crispness and focus. The kids knew that from this game moving forward, they would be playing for Quan's honor. And in the end, the Sentinels had won 42-6 and walked away with the kettle once again and Quan smiling down. With the homecoming victory in the past, it was time to prepare for the playoffs. After a first-round bye, we got to see a familiar opponent, Northern. The 17-7 victory from week 1 still in our minds. Quan still in our minds. This time, Northern will not be taken lightly, and we cruised to a 40-14 victory. In the next round, we played Joppatown. I don't know if I ever saw a team so focused and play so well. We played a well-rounded game that resulted in only having 9 first-half plays, yet we were up 42-0 at halftime. The second half saw Quan's brothers, who were called up to play in the playoffs, both make big plays. A touchdown by Jabril, an interception for Jamil. The final was 54-0, and Quan was most certainly smiling down on not only his brothers, but their teammates after their flawless performance. In the semifinal game, we played the tougher of the 2 opponents. Edmondson Westside boasted a powerful run game and also a speedy running back. Although we scored the first play of the game, they responded with 2 quick touchdowns, and we faced our first deficit of the year. It only lasted a matter of minutes, as Tanner Wirtz took his Captain America serum and turned into an NFL player for a play and ran through what seemed like Edmonton's entire team to turn the game around. From there, we didn't look back and won a hard-fought game 43-14 and earned a trip to Annapolis for a rematch with Mountain Ridge and a chance to be the state champions. It was finally the game everyone thought would happen, Ridge and Fort Hill for the state title. After lots of talk and fanfare, it was time, and we started the game out on fire, scoring on 3 plays in less than a minute. Mountain Ridge rebounded nicely with some trickery of their own and played a great first quarter. They actually took the lead 19-10 before we were able to adjust and quickly regain control of the game. After being down 19-10, we scored 35 unanswered points to take a commanding 45-19 lead and secured the school's 8th state championship. Pure joy then engulfed the sidelines. All the hard work was worth it. The Sentinels were state champions, and Quan was the first thing on their minds. They carried Quan with them every game. They played almost to perfection in homecoming and throughout the playoffs. They said they were going to do it for Quan, and they did. Congratulations to this year's Fort Hill Sentinels. I've never been prouder of a group of young men as I am of you guys. Get Big Red. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and announce everybody individually. Tony, why don't you come up and grab the state championship trophy? And go ahead and take it back to your seat.
Mr. Castle.
All right, Tony, go ahead and remain standing there. Yeah, go ahead and stand up. All right, so first off is Tony Palmisano. He played cornerback for us and running back for us. Next up is Saquon Jenkins, number 3, also running back and defensive back. His brother, Jabril Daniels, ended up taking his number for the rest of the season to play in his memory. Jabril, go ahead and stand up. Jabril played running back for us for the most part throughout the playoffs, and he also plays defensive back. Bryce Shade. Bryce Shade was our quarterback this year. Brevin Stubbs. Brevin played defensive back and running back for us. Isaiah Campbell. Isaiah played split end for us this year. Missing today, absent from school, Malachi Metz, who played halfback and defensive back for us. Next up is Lance Bender. Lance played quarterback for us. Colby Custer played defensive end, split end. Blake White, fullback, halfback, linebacker, defensive end, nickelback. Landon Keach played defensive line, tight end for us. Jackson Jones, halfback, defensive back. Anthony Burns, another kid that played a lot of positions, split end, quarterback, defensive end, linebacker, safety, you name it, he played it. Missing the day, absent from school, Noah Bombasi, played defensive back, halfback. Next up, Tanner Wirtz, played halfback, fullback, defensive end, nickelback for us. Tyler Hopkins, fullback, linebacker. Jacob Tichnell, kicker and punter. Also starred as the goalie on our soccer team, along with Colby, who also played soccer this year as well. Xavier Ashley played split end, safety, and linebacker for us. Jamil Daniels, he played defensive back for us throughout the playoffs and also a little bit of split end. Jace May played tight end, defensive line. TJ Lee, absent today from school, played defensive line for us. Next up, Taven Willis, played halfback, cornerback, and safety. Connor Lynn played split end and DB for us. Shane Welsh, fullback, linebacker. Josh Holtman, tight end, guard, and most notably, linebacker. Alex Anderson, split end, linebacker. Tyler Wilhelm, offensive, defensive line. Cameron Bean, offensive and defensive line. Ray Wharton, offensive, defensive line. Aiden Belford, offensive, defensive line. Darren Weller, offensive, defensive line. Caden Sharpless, offensive, defensive line. Xander Jenkins, offensive, defensive line. Hunter Van Meter, offensive, defensive line. Cam Banks, offensive, defensive line. Braden Sines, offensive, defensive line. Carter Hess, offensive and defensive line. Reese Votman, offensive, defensive line. Logan Van Meter, offensive, defensive line. Bryson Metz, tight end, linebacker. And Cooper Silber, kicker and punter. Go ahead, Tony, you can take it back up. let's go ahead and all stand up one more time and recognize again the 2021 1A state champions.
Individuals who took time out of their day to be with us here today, and to thank our 11th and 12th grade guests for your attention and respect throughout the ceremony. We are all very proud of your accomplishment, boys, and have enjoyed every moment of your victorious season. I'm going to ask our distinguished guests and our football team, along with our coaches, to remain here on the stage while we dismiss our students back to their 7th period classes. However, prior to doing that, our band is going to strike up the fight song one final time here as we dismiss. Students in the middle section will exit first by using the aisleways and exiting the doors in the back, followed by the students over here on my right, your left, will also exit through the back doors.